Hi, everyone. Welcome to Waste 360's Nothing Wasted podcast. On every episode, we invite the most interesting people in waste, recycling, and organics to sit down with us and chat candidly about their thoughts, their work, this unique industry, and so much more. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. We're excited to bring you a stellar session from our recent WasteExpo. Listen to these candid insights from Bill Caesar, CEO of WCA Waste Corp, who's being interviewed by Darryl Smith of the NWRA. Bill sheds a ton of light on the human side of this business, safety, leadership, and so much more. Please give a listen and enjoy.
Well, Bill, thank you for joining us. This is an important interview that we try to do every year. We were with Jim Fish last year, and I think people like to hear very much from the leadership of the industry, and we're glad you're here. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about your background and how you got to where you are, because people want to know that. As a leader in the industry, people always want to know how you got to where you are. So if you could talk to us about that a little bit. But first, I noticed something interesting in your bio, and I'll be careful how I say this, but I live in Washington, D.C., so I have a lot of friends that have worked for some spooky places with 3 letters in the name. And, I wanted to see if you could talk to us a little bit about how your career started in the Foreign Service. And thank you for your service, by the way. So.
I appreciate that. Prior to becoming involved in the waste industry, I had a whole nother career. I worked at the CIA and the State Department for 6 years. I was a Russian political and economic analyst. I lived in St. Petersburg and worked at the consulate in St. Petersburg for about a year and a half. And I worked at the State Department for about a year and a half for an ambassador that was responsible for an assistance program that the U.S. Congress had funded following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So I have an undergraduate and a graduate degree in Russian studies. There was a time when I could speak Russian fluently. I was talking to someone at Michael Hoffman's dinner last night who's Ukrainian, and it probably the first time I've tried to speak Russian in about a year or so. And I'm starting to lose it, which is sad, because I spent a large part of my life learning how to speak it, and now I'm starting to lose it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I happen to know from some of my friends and some of my family members in that kind of work how, quite frankly, how dangerous it can be. So you're a true patriot, and we, again, thank you for your service. Maybe you can talk to us all of those kinds of diplomatic and foreign service jobs. There's the family usually sitting back there somewhere. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your family. And I heard you had a couple kids.
I have 4 children. So my wife always reminds me that the first thing that I should do is thank her. And so I will try to do that. She's terrific. I have 4 children, 2 in college, and 2 still at home, a 5th grader and a 7th grader. If you're trying to do the math, I have a 10-year break between the oldest and the youngest. The oldest is 20, and the youngest is 10. The oldest is a boy, and I have 3 girls.
Very good. So after your foreign service career, you had initial entrance into the corporate world and the consulting world with McKinsey and Macquarie. And maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of information on how your young career in the corporate world started and what kind of things you got into.
When I left the agency, it was partly because I had decided that I didn't want my whole career to be advising other people on what they should do. I wanted to actually do something. So I went to business school and promptly became a management consultant, where I advised other people on what they should do. It didn't work out exactly as I thought it was going to go. But it was actually a terrific place to learn business. I had no business experience whatsoever other than what I had read in books. And there's a lot more than what you read in books.
Absolutely.
But was put in a situation where I was around people who were very capable, not just McKinsey people, but the clients that we worked with, having to deal with the most challenging problems that those companies had. Clients don't pay McKinsey to work on easy problems. You only work on the hard problems, and you learn how to solve hard problems, and you learn how to think about hard problems. You learn how to persuade people and convince people that what the facts and the data show is what you ought to do. And that was a very natural thing for me. I've always been a fact-driven person, but I worked in all different industries. It's kind of scary when I think about the things that I was an expert in for a minute. I also learned a ton about genetically modified corn and soybean seeds. I know an extraordinary amount about biofuels. These are useless things these days. I don't refer back to them for anything from the content perspective. But what you do carry with you is, how do you look at an industry, whatever the industry is? What's important in that industry? What are the drivers of success? What are the things that you have to do to succeed in any one of these industries? What are the metrics that you need to look at? What are the environments in which you're working in? Who are the competitors? All those things about how you look at a problem or an industry are things that are highly leverageable. The facts, the nouns can be replaced, but all the other things are very transferable and have been something that I found to be highly useful as I transitioned from consulting into the waste management field, and specifically at Waste Management. My first real job outside of consulting was at Waste, where I was a chief strategy officer, which was essentially an in-house consultant of sorts. So it was a very natural thing. It wasn't until I transitioned to running the recycling business at Waste Management where I could truly say that I had a P&L. I had people, large numbers of people that worked for me. I had people who were expecting financial and operational performance in a way different than I had ever had to deal with previously.
Leadership is just something I think about a lot these days, and I, wonder what you have to say about leadership. There's a lot of new leadership theories out, like servant leadership and all these kinds of things, and that's a test you can take to see what kind of leader you are. And when I look at employees, my number one thing I do is I try to figure out if they care or not. That's my, just something that's come to me over the course of my career. And you can tell if somebody cares if they come into your office yelling at you, they care, good employee. So, what kind of leader would you say you are, Bill? How do you motivate people, that kind of thing?
So I actually thought about this one quite a bit, because it's not something that I sort of wear around, that I have a motto. Yeah. And I think I share a lot of leadership characteristics that other people in the waste industry, other CEOs in the waste industry probably hold. And I did a little survey with some of the people who I work with or used to work with. And they came up with 4 characteristics: cuddly, feel good, soft, and easygoing. All right, so that's not. But I did think a lot about this, and I think there are a couple things that I would say describe my leadership style. The first one is honest. I make a point of ensuring that everybody knows what I think is important, why I think it's important, and that I will always be straight with them. I will always be fair. I can't claim that I will always be patient, but I will always be fair, and I will always be honest, both to the people who work for me, but also for the people that I work for. Because I think that it's as important as a manager. It's not just that you manage people, it's that you are managing your board, you are managing the people who own your company, who are invested in it, that you be the same person to both sides of that equation. I think that it has served me well to this point, that I don't get questioned on whether or not what I think is appropriate, whether or not it's for the right reasons. I think that most people who work with me know that if you were to ask me what my approach to management, there's management by walking around, I do a little bit of walking around. I manage by asking questions. I ask questions all the time. 90% of the time, I don't know the answer to the questions. Right? I'm not asking questions to test somebody. I'm asking questions because I honestly want to know why something happened. What does it mean? What did we learn? How are we going to move forward? I don't look back on much of anything, right? I may not be the most optimistic person, but I am definitely a forward-thinking person. Things that have happened, and we figure out how to move on. I don't dwell on those things. But I do want us to learn from the things where we make mistakes. And I want people to understand how things came to be so that we can better manage them. So I know it's kind of a long-winded way, but how I interact with my people is extremely important to me.
Yeah, I appreciate the management by walking around. When I was a safety guy, one of my early bosses told me you can't do safety from your desk, and I think there's a lot of professions you can't really do from your desk. And I've enjoyed getting out in the field and doing a couple ride-alongs with people. And do you get out with the drivers or out into your facilities? Is that something you enjoy, and you try to do that often?
Absolutely. So one of the other questions that I found out you might ask me about, what are my hobbies and interests? A couple of years ago, WCA had never had a driver of the year. And in protest of that, I started my own driver of the year program because we weren't getting the national recognition. So we started our own. And that has since been rectified. So we started our own, and one of the first drivers of the year that we had was a guy from our operations in Durango, and his boss is here today, Curly Rodriguez. And Curly is a salt of the earth guy. He is a guy who cares. And I sat up with him and his wife after we had our ceremony. She was a court translator in New Mexico. And they were telling me about her business and how she had so much work to do. She wasn't getting paid, and I basically gave them an hour's worth of very high-priced consulting. And he called me about 6 months ago as he was putting an addition on his home that his wife took all my advice. She jacked up her prices. She got rid of the deadbeats. She only works for people who pay. And he doesn't even really need to work anymore.
That's amazing.
and I just felt so good that I had an opportunity to, look, this was not rock. There was no analysis required. This was just like, stop. You have people who don't pay you very much and the checks are late. And you have people who will pay you whatever you ask, and they're lined up out the door. All right, you don't get to work with me anymore. You double. Let's see how short the line gets. And she is making money hand over fist right now. And so I sincerely appreciate the time that I get to spend with my people. So the reason I come back to that is that Curly challenged me to participate in a bike race in Durango, Colorado. It's called the Iron Horse Classic. It's 50 miles. 50 miles doesn't sound like a lot of miles. It's not a lot of miles, but it's straight up the friggin' hill. You start at 6,500 feet. You go through two 10,000-foot passes. I have been training for this, as have my CFO, Diana, and my VP of Sales, Tony Pilkington, are going to be riding with me in 3 weeks. As we do 50 miles up the mountain from Durango to Silverton, chasing a train. So I love my people.
That's great. I am a retired runner, now bicyclist. So I could just make the rest of the interview about bicycling, but I'll refrain. So I love this kind of stuff, getting to know the leadership of the industry. But let's talk a little bit about business, because I think some people would like to hear from you. And the most obvious thing, how's WCA doing with recovering from the recycling market's issues?
Within WCA, recycling accounts for like 1.8% of our revenue. It is not the most important thing that I do every day. However, it has, even at 1.8%, it has a meaningful impact on my ability to deliver the financial performance that my board is looking for. And compounding that is that because of my prior position at Waste Management, I know way more about recycling than the average bear. Sometimes that works to my advantage because I can dazzle them with my BS, but sometimes you just have to say, look, we're doing the best that we can. And there's not, look, if there was a secret to recycling, it would have gotten out by now. You force the people bringing you material to pay you more for it. You don't give them rebates anymore. You improve your operations, and you try like hell to find somebody to buy the stuff you're making. It's not that complicated. Mm-hmm. It can get real complicated if you want it to be, but at the end of the day, run your plant as efficiently as possible. Don't pay for crappy material and sell everything that you can, if you can.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, the vast majority of the value that you create in recycling is a function of things that are completely out of your hands.
I agree, and that's a good explanation of it. I've been a little bit frustrated. I've almost been here 2 years, and some of the public opinion relative to recycling can be a little frustrating in the media coverage recently. Some of these manufacturing companies will come out, they'll change a formulation and issue a press release and say, now this is recyclable, and they forget about us. We got to actually do something with it, and then we certainly don't generate the materials. So right. Some of the PR side and media side and the association is looking at that, trying to see how we can get the word out to help out. So you're in Houston, and a couple of years ago there was a hurricane, and I'm sure your organization was very involved in the recovery efforts and probably still are. Do you have any lessons learned relative to emergency management you want to share with us?
If anybody's familiar with Houston, you'll know that Hurricane Harvey wasn't the first time the city flooded. It may have been the worst time, but it wasn't the first time. 2015, I believe it was, a year and a half before Harvey, and it almost broke us. I don't mean financially, I mean physically, because we had not put in place the processes, the procedures, the guidelines, the management that would enable us to go to customers, to go to residents who had been flooded, who had piled furniture and drywall and other construction debris on their curb alongside their container of waste. And in Houston, we have some contracts that are known as take-all contracts. It's at the curb, you're supposed to take it. Now, what we hadn't fully grasped was that take all does not really mean take all. It means take all producible waste. At least that's my definition of it. Because when we tried to take all, it killed us. We couldn't get down a street without filling up a truck. And we were not picking up the waste. And we had these two floods within a few months of each other, and it literally crushed us. So we figure out what to do the next time. And lo and behold, here comes Hurricane Harvey. A real disaster, a real deal disaster. I mean, if you weren't there, it's hard to describe what it was like. Our people knew what to do, and they did it. And I couldn't be prouder of them. We had 70 people that within our own WCA community who were forced out of their homes. We had drivers who were working for us, who we had to put up in hotels because their homes were destroyed. And our ability to not just survive Harvey, but to thrive in that environment. Because post the flood, there's the cleanup. And the cleanup lasted at least 6 months. I could not be prouder of our organization for what they did, how they learned from the mistakes of the past, right. How we communicated with our customers, how we brought resources in from outside of the state, and how well we served our customers in that community.
That's great. It sounds like it brought your team closer together. And
it absolutely did.
Yeah. So,
absolutely did.
So workforce is certainly an issue, relative to drivers, mechanics, et cetera. And we're also trying very hard to bring more women into the workforce, which I think is very, very important for us. Can you just talk a little bit about your recruiting efforts? How WCA, the association is looking at several programs, vets, things of this nature that we can try to. And our Women's Council does a great job, but what's WCA doing to manage the workforce and the lack of workers and lack of people that want to work with their hands outside and in the sun on a truck, and everybody wants to work at Google these days.
So it was about a year and a half ago when we put together a group of people to look at what the drivers were in our whole process, from our recruitment through to I'll call a stable worker in our environment. We tried to understand, what are we doing, what could we be doing better, and how we attract people. What do our benefits need to be? What does our comp need to be? How are we going to promote the company? What happens when they show up on the first day of work? How do we introduce them to WCA? How do we try to get them to realize that we want them to work with us, but we want them to be part of us? And we found that we were lacking in that first impression that we made to employees. We realized that we probably hadn't trained our frontline supervisors to help new employees get started and get grounded. We probably hadn't thought through new employees who were coming from outside the industry, who maybe their prior job was moving cases of beer or soda, and they had a CDL, and this is different. So it was a broad-based effort for us. We called it Genesis because it was from the beginning of your introduction to WCA. Look, I can't tell you that as a result of this that we're top quartile. I can tell you that we're much better than we were. It was interesting yesterday during the investor conference, several guys talked about, what their metrics were, and turnover. I think maybe for the first time, turnover made it onto the list that these guys use. It's been on our list for the last 2 years. I get turnover, voluntary and involuntary, every month, broken down by district. And we want to understand where we've got problems and where we're doing well, and what can we do to transfer what we do well to the places where we got problems. We're not doing anything like we have a specific vet training. What we've started to do on drivers is we've reached out to a couple driving schools where we are sponsoring students and introducing them to the industry at an early stage with the expectations that we can bring them on. It is a challenge, and it's a challenge that I don't think is going away anytime soon for any of us. Right.
Yeah, NWRA is trying to work on a vet program as well, so we might be able to assist with that with the industry. I want to talk. No conversation like this should be void of a discussion about safety. I used to be a pretty good safety guy, still am, I think, and observed the industry for now 2 years, and I've just come to a personal belief that to make big jumps in our industry, technology is going to be the thing, automated pickup, that kind of thing. The mining industry had a long history of being a very, very dangerous place to work, and lots of fatalities. But over the last 100 years, their fatality rate has gone down steadily every 5 years, and the reason that is mostly technology, automated miners, that kind of thing. And we're kind of flatlining as an industry, and I think we should talk about it honestly. We talk about safety a lot, we do a lot of things about safety, but we haven't come up with the golden solution yet by any means, and we're working very hard to do that. How does WCA approach safety? Is it something that weighs on your mind a lot? Do you have any advice for the industry at large?
Does it weigh on me a lot? Absolutely. I spent 13 years at McKinsey. I spent 6 years at the CIA. Nobody ever died on my watch. Yeah. I can't say that today. We had our first fatality of an employee about 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't sorted it out yet. If there's one piece of advice that I would give the industry, it would be to make sure that your employees know that their lives are worth more than any piece of equipment that you own, and that they should never, ever put themselves in a position where they could get hurt because a piece of equipment is going to get damaged. I don't feel like we can do very much about the distracted drivers. I can't fix that, but I can make sure that my people know that a little damage isn't worth it.
Yeah, I feel for you, Bill. And as a safety guy with safety programs, I've had some very bad injuries on my watch, and I've had a fatality on my watch, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. And you start going back in your mind, is there something I could do better? But everybody should just keep it at the forefront of their minds and try to do the absolute best we can. It's a very necessary industry. It's a very, and it's a very dangerous industry. We're trying, at one time, at the same time, we're saying that this is a great industry to come and work in, try to bring in the women's groups, the women employees, the vets, everything, and, the advantages of being a driver in our industry. But at the same time, we have the unfortunate responsibility to say, hey, we're the 5th most dangerous occupation. So we're all working hard on that. And, we need to pull together as a team and keep making progress in that regard. So, I can tell how much you care, and I think everybody appreciates that. So I'm going to give the audience a little bit of time to ask a question.
I'm the CAO of a waste company in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was a 20-year consultant. There was one of my clients. I come in, and we are making drastic changes. We've done quite a few acquisitions, but kind of like you, I didn't have that level of trash in my blood. It's probably getting there quick. But and I'm a woman. So what kind of advice do you give me to transition a team of over 350 employees who have kind of been entrenched in yesterday's trash process?
I think there are, since I don't have a lot, I could talk on that one for a long time. But I will start with leadership. I think it is very hard for frontline people to change what they're doing if frontline leadership hasn't bought into it. When I came to WCA, we made some changes in leadership. Some because it was clear that the person wasn't capable of doing the job that we wanted them to do. Some because the person doing the job realized that maybe they didn't want to do it in this environment. And that was good. And I feel so good about the team I have today. We have capable people who are smart, who are doing what they need to do, who care about people. And that makes all the difference. So I would start with your frontline leadership.
Good morning. I'm actually following up on the prior question, which is, given your comments on that, how do you feel, or what is your initial thoughts on all the excitement over chemical recycling for plastics?
Well, very interesting question, Leon. I bet you did a little reading before you did that. So, one of the companies that Waste had invested in was a company called Agilix, which uses a technology called pyrolysis to convert plastic to oil. And it was one of the two that I thought would have a chance. I left Waste in 2014. Waste still had a position in the company. Flash forward to 2019. And the guy who is running that business now was my right-hand guy over OGG 5 years prior. And he has done some things that make the company look like there's a real chance that this could work at a commercial scale. And so as of a month ago, I'm on the board of this company. I was on the board of it when I was representing Waste Management's investment in it, and now I'm on the board as an independent director. I think there is something there, Leo. I really do. And it's not so much because the economics have been worked out, which I think they have made tremendous progress there, but it is because people care about plastics today in a way that they did not care 6 or 8 years ago. Consumer products companies, chemical manufacturers care a lot because we've got plastics in the ocean, we've got plastics in sea turtles. Indonesia, which has got a myriad of problems, and it's not a bad place, but it has a myriad of problems, took the time out of their day to ban plastic straws. Like, I got bigger fish to fry if I'm in Indonesia, but they care. And it is because these entities that have lots of money care, and they care about how you perceive them and how you will choose or choose not to buy their products if you don't take care of them. That is driving the investment in this space, and that I think will drive the economics, because they will be willing to do things where I can produce either a synthetic crude, or I can take a polymer to a monomer. And yes, it's more expensive than the virgin-derived equivalent, but it may be more expensive, but it doesn't carry the same negativity that the virgin-derived equivalent does. So I'm very hopeful. I wouldn't have joined the company if I didn't think there was a good chance.
Well, very good. Thanks, Bill. Thank you for being so candid with us today. You're